I started off my fieldwork at Ridgeview Middle School with the band director, Mrs. Chomos. I had an amazing experience in this classroom, as Mrs. Chomos was a wonderful example and role model for me, and I found myself being able to personally relate to her in many different ways. Not only is Mrs. Chomos a great teacher and director, but the school seemed to have a great appreciation for the arts, and she had the ability and resources to be able to do extracurricular things, like form jazz bands for each grade, teach a music appreciation class, and create a pep band for home basketball games. I had the opportunity to work with 2 6th-grade bands during my time at Ridgeview. The students were always enthusiastic about coming to band and seemed to love Mrs. Chomos and have a great relationship with her. Not only did the students work on concert rep in class, but Mrs. Chomos made sure to teach them more fundamental music skills too. They would have a rhythm of the day, which they were tested over eventually, and she was always explaining musical concepts to the students about their pieces and teaching them things about the style or composer. During the second half of the semester, I have been going to Goshen Lane Elementary School in Gahanna and working with their music teacher, Mrs. Davis. I've learned so much from being in this classroom and have gotten a much better idea of what teaching elementary school music is like. I wasn't consistently with the same classes due to the rotational style schedule that the school uses, which has had its pros and cons. On one hand, it's been great to be able to see music classes taught from kindergarten all the way up through 5th grade, and being able to compare the skill levels of the students and the way Mrs. Davis's teaching style differed per age group. On the other hand, one thing that was really cool about being at the middle school was that I was able to see the students' progress during my time, and I was able to teach them things and watch them get better and grasp these concepts as time went on. That's not something I was able to experience with the constantly changing elementary school classes. However, I still had plenty of great chances to teach these students something new. One aspect that I'd like to discuss in my 2 experiences is the classroom management skills and styles portrayed by my cooperating teachers. EdGlossary.org defines classroom management as the wide variety of skills and techniques that teachers use to keep students organized, orderly, focused, attentive, on task, and academically productive during a class. I am confident in saying that both Mrs. Davis and Mrs. Chomos were absolute pros at this, but in very different ways. I think the main reason that Mrs. Chomos has such a great control and management over her students is because they respected her and looked up to her. I would love to have seen her first couple years of teaching and how she developed this relationship with her students over time. I think this is the main reason why her students were, for the most part, so focused and attentive. Another reason I think these middle schoolers were focused and attentive is because Mrs. Chomos had things for them to work on other than just their concert rep, like I previously mentioned. This is something that's really important in keeping students' attention, especially middle schoolers. Changing up the lesson every once in a while will keep them from getting bored and restless. Mrs. Chomos also had many specific ways to help her students stay organized. She had organized bags and an equipment cart for the percussionists to keep their sticks and mallets in, which she explained to me was something she developed over time. After a few years of teaching, she realized that for some reason the percussionists didn't keep track of their instrument, their sticks, as well as the wind players did, so she developed this system to help them better. This is a problem-solving skill that I saw happen a lot in her classroom, and is crucial to having good classroom management. Mrs. Chomos also had a reward system where she handed out Chomos dollars when students answered questions correctly or set a good example. At the end of every quarter, they would have a raffle day where students could turn in their dollars for small prizes. Another part of this system was a buyback box that she kept in the front of the classroom. If students left things where they weren't supposed to be, like if they left their music out or sticks or other papers, they would have to buy it back with their dollars. This is a great way to encourage students to stay organized. Maintaining group focus was another aspect of classroom management that Mrs. Chomos demonstrated effectively. In Kunin's Concepts for Managing Whole Group Instruction, group alerting is defined as engaging the attention of the whole class while individuals are responding. Mrs. Chomos did a lot of individual instruction, especially with the beginner band class, which consisted of about 7 students. She would ask just one student to play a rhythm, or to count a rhythm, or to play their part in a piece, etc. Focusing on one student, especially in a middle school setting, can be pretty risky, but she always kept the students engaged by having them ready to help the individual student out if they needed it, or by telling them to finger along as the individual played. In his article, Classroom Management, Gordon states that virtually little or no learning can occur in a classroom bereft of effective management and discipline. In classes lacking discipline, precious learning time is wasted as the teacher attempts to implement management strategies. In essence, learning musical skills is replaced by correcting non-musical skills. Social learning becomes the main focus. I find this statement extremely interesting, especially after my experience with Mrs. Davis at the elementary school. Based on this statement, Mrs. Davis would be considered to have a horrible classroom management skills because she spends a ton of time teaching social skills. However, this is something that's obviously really necessary when teaching younger students. One thing that surprised me the most during my experience here is how much time Mrs. Davis spends explaining simple processes, like lining up the door after class or walking from a spot on the carpet to get a small instrument, and how to set that instrument down quietly without making any noise. I don't know why this surprised me so much, because it now seems very obvious to me how important it is to explain everything so carefully to younger students. With that being said, Mrs. Davis displays this concept wonderfully. I feel like I have learned so much from her on how to manage a classroom of young elementary schoolers. She always sees problems and makes sure to address them before they even happen. This is what Gordon would describe as with-itness. Gordon defines with-itness in his classroom management article as communicating general awareness of the classroom to students, identifying and correcting misbehavior promptly and correctly. For example, last week I was helping Mrs. Davis lay out some small toy symbols for a game the students were going to play. Some symbols had red handles and some symbols had brown handles. I hadn't paid much attention to this until she told me to make sure I laid out symbols with all the same color handle. She knew that, as little as it was, there would be a potential problem with students arguing over who got what color, and fixed the problem before it even became a problem. I've taken this skill with me and now find myself identifying problems like this before they even happen, in my fieldwork and even in my own life. Overall, I have had amazing experiences with both of my cooperating teachers in their classrooms, and I've learned so many skills from them that I can continue to use both in my future classrooms and just in everyday life.